The NBA trade deadline is tomorrow, and to the surprise for a lot of us, at least me anyway, the Bulls have been the most active team on the trade market thus far, with still 24 hours left to go before the deadline, with more potential moves likely incoming for Chicago. We saw back-to-back trades being announced yesterday within an hour of each other, and pretty substantial trades, I might add. It wasn't like this was a Dario Saric trade where the Bulls took in a guy who never plays for a couple second-round picks. No, these were sizable pickups in which the Bulls walked away from the day with the additions of Jaden Ivey from the Detroit Pistons and Anfernee Simons from the Celtics and Mike Conley from the Timberwolves, even though he's likely going to be bought out, with the outgoing players being Kevin Huerter and Nikola Vucevic. I did a couple quick reaction videos to each of these trades when the news first broke, and now that we've had some time to let the dust settle a bit and understand the ramifications and the impact of these trades, I wanted to dive into them a bit further, highlight the specifics of the trades, why the Bulls made these moves, and what it could potentially signal for any additional transactions in the next 24 hours. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I hesitated to start putting together this video because it's very possible, especially now that we know the Bulls are open for business, that additional trades could happen any moment, making some of these talking points moot, especially if for some reason the Bulls decide to, again, buy out Mike Conley, likely to happen, or hell, even flip Simons for other pieces, or of course, I think we're all expecting this to happen any hour now, the Bulls move on from Kobe White or Audasumu, potentially both. But I'll go based on the current information we have at hand, and of course make an updated video for any additional transactions that do in fact happen. So let's start with the first trade, the first one that came in, and that was the Bulls being part of the three-team deal that involved the Timberwolves, Pistons, which netted them Jaden Ivey and Mike Conley, while they sent out Kevin Huerter's expiring contract to the Pistons. Now, for those that don't know, Jaden Ivey was a former number 5 overall pick in the 2022 draft, a heavily touted recruit coming out of college, and in his rookie year, he looked to be one of the top players in that draft class, averaging over 16 points per game and 5.2 assists as the Pistons' starting shooting guard, albeit, yes, on a bad team at that time. And if you remember, and I mentioned this on the reaction video, Ivey was one of those players that a lot of us Bulls fans were hoping would be linked or included in a potential Zach LaVine trade deal after Zach and his camp made it clear they would be open to finding a new home, and then no team showed any interest, except there was some noise coming out of Detroit that they would be interested in making a play at Zach LaVine. And because we knew the Pistons weren't going to move on from Cade, Duren, or Thompson, the thought was, okay, Jaden Ivey, that has to be the guy, right? But even then, it was more of a pipe dream at that time. Like, we could only wish the Bulls could get a young, up-and-coming talent who was 21 at that time for Zach LaVine on a max contract. Well, fast forward to today, and in a way, they sort of did net Ivey eventually as part of that Zach LaVine trade, since Kevin Huerter was part of the LaVine deal, and the Bulls have now flipped Huerter for Jaden Ivey. Now, here's what I'll say about this trade. Overall, it's a good trade. It's a good trade for the Bulls. It really is. I'm not going to say it's some insane killer deal or a fleecing on the part of AK, because it does come with some drawbacks, which I'll speak to. But looking at the trade holistically, it's a good business move for the Chicago Bulls. It's good business in the sense that the Bulls were able to acquire a young, 23-year-old athletic, strong offensive player, former lottery pick, for Kevin Huerter. Like, it would be one thing if the Bulls sent out future picks, even second-round picks, to land Jaden Ivey, or they traded him for, say, Io or Kobe, players who, while certainly are on the trading block, are still players you would presume to hold some kind of value. But no, they traded Kevin Huerter, who's had an up-and-down year on an expiring contract and likely wasn't going to be with this team long-term, or at least be on his current contract. To me, the most likely scenario of how Kevin Huerter's situation was going to play out was that they were going to let him walk on free agency and get nothing in return. And that would have been okay. It's Kevin Huerter. You can't expect to get much for him in return. But instead, you get Jaden Ivey, a 23-year-old who shot 41% from 3 last season on over 5 attempts per game and averaged over 17 points per game. He was really cooking last year before getting injured. Don't get me wrong, the injuries are a concern. But to get that kind of player in return for Kevin Huerter is actually crazy, and the Bulls were able to pull this off. Now, they took on Mike Conley, who is obviously no longer the player he used to be. He's going to be bought out, I would imagine, or at least, not going to be in the Bulls rotation. So we'll put that aside for now. But from Ivey's perspective, because like I mentioned, there are risks or drawbacks with bringing him into the roster. It's still unclear how worried we need to be about his health, how durable he's going to be able to be. But what the Bulls do have is the next 30 days, or really 28 or 29 days. Obviously, he's not going to be able to join the team right away, but they have these games to evaluate Ivey for the rest of the season, see how he looks, see how he fits with Josh Giddey, see if he's a viable piece that you can build with as part of your core going forward. And if for whatever reason it doesn't work out, the fit isn't there, or it's clear his health is a legitimate concern, the upside is no longer there, then you let him walk as a restricted free agent or even potentially do a sign and trade for him in the summer. And if that ends up being the case, it's not like they traded valuable assets to get him and then you just let him leave for nothing. It's not like the Josh Giddey situation, where the Bulls traded their most valuable asset at that time in Alex Caruso, and it would have been unacceptable if you make that kind of trade all but to let Giddey walk in free agency. And like with Giddey, the Bulls will also have a lot of leverage to retain Ivey as a restricted free agent. And because Ivey has been battling injuries, because he's had a down year from a statistical standpoint, the Bulls could get him on a fairly team-friendly deal. They're going to have to pay him though, and it is going to be a decent contract. Like, depending on how well he plays for the rest of the season, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets something close in the range of $18 to $20 million a year, which I talked about in my last video as one of the drawbacks with this trade, if you will, is that it immediately puts the Bulls on the clock to work out an extension and pay Ivey. The good news though for the Bulls is they're going to have ample cap space going into the summer to be able to pay him, as well as bring in other free agents or potentially extend some of their own guys on expiring deals, which of course includes Kobe and Ayo. And yes, even Anfernee Simons, who the Bulls just acquired in a deal. Going into that trade now, I mean, that's an interesting one because on the one hand, I'm like, Anfernee Simons, how does this make sense for the Bulls, especially after they just traded for Jaden Ivey? Very similar players, at least from an offensive perspective. You're adding another guard to the roster, another scoring guard who doesn't play defense. Like, eventually you're going to have to add backcourt players who can play solid D. And then on top of that, he's another guy on an expiring deal. If you want to keep him around long term, you're going to have to pay him. But you know what? Then I took a step back. I put things into perspective. The Bulls got something for Nikola Vucevic. There was no doubt in my mind that Vooch was going to remain on this team for the rest of the season and was going to walk in the summer, and the Bulls would get nothing for him in return. Like, I had fully accepted that as a reality, because what team is going to trade future assets for an aging Vucevic, a big man who doesn't play a lick of defense and can barely jump? I know that's kind of a harsh thing to say because I actually really liked Vucevic and always felt he wasn't appreciated enough by Bulls fans for being a solid player, durable player, always available, but that's the reality of his trade value. I just didn't think there was going to be a market for him at all. And when you know it, the Bulls ended up getting Anfernee Simons for him. For his flaws, he is still one of the better three-point shooters in the league on high volume and has actually been solid for the Boston Celtics this season in taking on a lesser role than what he had in Portland. He's also nearly a decade younger than Vucevic, so there's that. But more importantly, and it was an underrated aspect of this trade, the Bulls acquired a second-round pick in the deal, while also sending out a second-round pick. But the second-round pick they sent out was the pick they just acquired in the Sarge deal, which is Denver's pick in 2027, a pick that will likely be in the 50s. But the pick they received from Boston is the most favorable of Minnesota, New Orleans, New York, or Portland. And given the fact that the Pelicans have the worst record between all those teams, it's most likely going to be the Pelicans' second-round pick, which at this time, if the season were to end today, would be the number 32 pick in this year's draft. So it's most likely this pick is going to be somewhere in the range of between 31 and 35, as I don't see the Pelicans suddenly crawling their way up into the standings. So even though I'm not very high on Simons and don't think Simons is a player that is probably going to be around long term for the Bulls, at a minimum, the Bulls could just let him leave in free agency and take the pretty high second-round pick that they got for Vucevic, a player we all thought had no value on the market. But the Bulls were somehow able to extract a 31 to 35 pick in this upcoming stacked draft class. It's good asset management, a good return. So look, I know we like to be critical of AK and the Bulls front office and their decisions over the years. They rightfully deserve criticism. And yes, they waited too long to trade Vucevic, likely waited too long on trading Kobe White as well if that ends up coming to fruition. But give the Bulls some credit. These are solid moves, good business moves where they turned a lot of nothing into something. The real test now is going to be, what do they do with Kobe and Ayo? According to the national media, even Shams Charania said the Bulls are not done yet and are still very active on the trade market with both Kobe and Ayo, with a lot of teams being interested in Ayo in particular. But By the time you're watching this, it's very possible that one or both of those guys have been dealt, because I can't see a scenario in which the Bulls could possibly finish out the season with all of these guards that they have on their roster. But let me know what you guys thought of these trades. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.